Hi there, I'm Jasmine Charles, and this is my presentation on the changing shapes of the television, the progression of the television over the decades. First off, I decided to do the presentation on the evolution of the television due to the fact that we often see televisions in our day-to-day lives, whether it be at home or other places, but never stop to think of the fact that they've been through so many iterations over the decades. My presentation encompasses the television evolution over the course from the 1920s to the early 2000s. I will be using a multitude of websites and a video to help navigate the evolution of the television over this decades. But first off, a quick video on how televisions are made.
TVs are amazing and they get better every year. The basic technology, though, has been around for about 50 years. Let's take a look at how it works. This is the inside of your basic television set. I know it looks complicated like a nuclear reactor to a lot of people, but it really only has 4 important parts. Back here, there's the electron gun, then the steering coils, then the phosphor screen up front, that's where the image is going to be displayed, and a glass tube that holds it all together. The electron gun, it sounds like it's out of Star Wars, but its job is simply to produce 1 or 3 electron beams that are going to shoot forward and light up the phosphor screen. When the electron beam hits the phosphor screen, it lights up a tiny portion of it called a pixel. There are over 200,000 pixels on a typical television screen. The steering coils are in charge of moving the electron beam. They're able to make it scan from left to right and top to bottom to paint an entire image. So that's how a basic TV set works. And now there's all kinds of new technologies like projection screens. I'm Marshall Brain, and that's
First off is the 1920s, the beginning of the television. The first television was made by Philo Taylor Farnsworth in 1926 by using beams of moving electrons and a primitive camera. Televising started in 1928, where the radio was televised due to the pushing of Charles Jenkins, the Federal Commission author of the Washington, D.C., where it was broadcasted to the general public and had a resolution of around 58 lines. And as you can see, here's what a TV at the time would look kind of like, and here's one of the popular shows. Next on is to the 1930s entering the scene. In the early 1930s, Telefsion created the first fully electronic cathode ray tube television in Germany, with later manufacturing being in France and the United Kingdom and the USA. In the UK, it took till 1932 for their first broadcast to air on a channel, and then wait until 1936 for these broadcasts to become a regular course for their television. In 1939 was the regular broadcasting was becoming involved in television, such as broadcasting the opening of the New York World Affairs. It was transmitting to over just 400 television sets in the New York area, with audience members ranging from 5,000 to 8,000 people. Television sets at the time would cost $200 to $600, which was quite a hefty sum for people at the time, with the annual salary only equaling to $1,368. Next on is the 1940s, the Cable Connect era. During the 1940s, Peter Goldmark, a CBS researcher from Hungary, developed the concept of mechanical televisions that would reproduce to all televisions everywhere. Cable TV was also invented, so it would be easier for people who lived in more mountainous areas to be able to connect their TV to more stations, and not just their local radio. Next on is to the 1950s, out with the old and in with the new. This was the year where they took an account for longer distance broadcasting for people in further out states in America. They were experiencing with long distance microwaves and transmitting signals further out. Additionally, everything was produced in monochrome at the time, so mostly black and white, as you can see in the pictures here. This was also a time period where there was a mass surge of buying of televisions, hitting a new all-time high of 6 million television sets being bought that decade. On to the 1960s, the golden age of television. As you can see by the graph here, the television sets in the 1960s and midway through had a skyrocketing amount of sales. The 1960s was the golden age of television as memorable shows popped up, such as The Flintstones, Batman, and Star Trek. In the later years, Technicolor televisions were more widely produced, entering into more homes. In 1970, everything started becoming in color, and here's a television set at the time. 1960, this is the year where they made the permanent change to color television for production instead of a mix of selling both color televisions and monochrome televisions. In 1972, the home box office, also known as the HBO, was created for people to pay for a subscription to gain premium cable shows and on-demand videos, which is now a widely used subscription technique that people use today for cable televisions. 1980s television shows, more and more and more. The sets started getting bigger and they had even more shows playing on for people to watch. The 80s was the year for many sitcoms and drama shows to come to light, such as Married with Children, a very popular show for the time. Then, in 1984, the Cable Act was implemented and was able to expand so much that it was able to end. By the end of the 1980s, nearly 53 million American families had subscribed to different forms of cable television. In the 1990s, Family Ties. In this era, many different shows came arise for more lower class presenting families, such as The Simpsons and Family Guy. 1990s, this was the year where the revival game show had the revival of game shows such as Who Wants to Be a Millionaire coming back to television as well. The TV system was also upgraded for more hybrid of fiber optic and coaxial cable. This gave rise to a more broadband network and to make their own multi-channel services. Lastly, the 2000s, a new century for television. As you can see, this is the year where televisions became more high depth in the way they were being made, and there was more shows than anyone could compete with at the time, than any era could compete with. After half a decade, upgrades to the at-home television set included features such as larger television screens and significant rise in the numbers of television hours accessible for people at home, with the television being integrated into most homes worldwide and not just in North America. My thoughts on the future for television. From what I've seen over the course of my research, I feel that I can predict that the television will continue to grow and have wider and larger screens as more and more come of it into demand. Also, it will try to integrate more high-def technology to give viewers a better at-home experience. I also believe that they might try to take the approach where the person will get 2 or more television sets to encompass the room, just like a gaming console would, so there's more angles to your television set and how you watch your shows. Lastly, it will be interesting how the usage of the internet comes into the play with streaming services and cable in years to come. I can see with online media becoming more and more popular, I can see cable TV becoming obsolete in the next few years, making way more for personalized streaming services from companies and continuous high usage of internet streaming services such as YouTube. And that was my presentation on the progress of the history of the television. Thank you.